guys! Okay, so today I'm doing the Chapter 24 Industry Comes of Age for my Apush final project for Coach Thomas, period 3A. So yeah, Chapter 24, Industry Comes of Age, let's get to it. Chapter 24, this is the first part. It's about the railroads, specifically the transcontinental railroads. You can see my attempted drawing of a railroad. But basically during this time, 1865 to 1900, the country's railroads network increased significantly because of the high costs and risks associated with railroad construction. Congress subsidized the cost of many railroad construction projects and gave a lot of unused public land to the railroad companies. So there were 5 transcontinental railroads built: the Northern Pacific, Topeka and Santa Fe, Southern Pacific, the Great Northern, and Atchison. In 1862, Congress selected the Union Pacific Railroad Company to build a transcontinental railroad starting in Omaha, Nebraska. On the other side of the country, the Central Pacific Railroad Company was responsible for laying track in California, starting in California. And in 1869, the railroads combined, like they met in the middle, and it was finished, and it allowed for increase in trade with Asia, and it opened up the West for expansion, which gets in a lot in other chapters because we were able to expand more, and it brought more into the Civil War and those kind of political civil issues. That was my cat. Both of these railroad companies, the Union Pacific and Central Pacific, received financial aid from the government. Cornelius Vanderbilt made a lot of money from the Eastern railroads, and 2 advancements helped the development of the railroads: the steel rail and the standard gauge of the track width. As I said before, the railroads stimulated industrialization in the country post-Civil War years. Yeah, you can let her up. It created an enormous domestic market for American raw materials and manufactured goods. It also stimulated immigration, and until the 1880s, every town in America had its own local time that they went by. But when the railroads came in, specifically November 18th, 1883, it divided America into 4 time zones, which was a proposed kind of ordeal to avoid train wrecks and scheduling issues. So within the railroad kind of company, they were able to sell bonds, and that inflated claims and the company's assets and profits. Railroad king and manipulators were a huge part of the monopoly and exercised too much direct control over the lives of people because the people relied on these railroads to get everywhere, to send products everywhere. Specifically the farmers. Sometimes railroad companies colluded with each other to protect their assets. These were called pools, which is where they agreed to divide the business in a given area and then share those profits, the pooling of wealth. And yeah, that's about it for the railroads. They helped impact everything in the chapter. All right, this next part is about the government. The government brittles the iron horse, and the iron horse is that railroad system. So you can see with my crappy drawing, it's all about the ICC and kind of 1886, 1887. So during the Depression of the 1870s, farmers protested against railroaders who ran the farms into bankruptcy. In 1887, Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act. It prohibited rebates in pools. Those pools were the sharing and dividing of profits, and required railroads to publish their rates openly, forbade unfair discrimination against shippers, and outlawed charging more for a short trip than a long trip over the same line. It also created the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Act, which to administer and enforce the new Interstate Commerce Act. The new laws provided a forum where competing businesses could resolve their conflicts in peaceful ways instead of engaging in price wars, which ultimately affected the farmers and the lives of the people, as I said before, because they did everything on these railroads. So that was kind of the government's play into it. Let's get on to the next section. All right, so this is the mechanization. The telephone was created in 1876 by Alexander Graham Bell. This invention revolutionized the way Americans communicated. So you can see there was a lot of communication and traveling, and just we were able to get out of the little towns that we had originally lived in. In 1879, the light bulb was invented. It was a great idea, a little bing kind of idea by Thomas Edison. It was the electric light bulb. He also invented many other numerous inventions. That was a real quick section on the mechanization. So this one is about kind of the economic ways, like the industry. So we have three tycoons, famous tycoons. Andrew Carnegie, which was the steel kind of portion. He was called the Steel King. John D. Rockefeller, who was the oil baron. And then J. Pierpont Morgan, who was the banker's banker. They destroyed their competition. Carnegie used the tactic of vertical integration to combine all phases of manufacturing into one organization. He had businesses and he controlled every aspect of the kind of process, from the mining to the marketing to the selling. Rockefeller used horizontal integration, which meant allying with his competitors to monopolize the given market. This was Rockefeller. It created tycoons and monopolies in the industry. Andrew Carnegie, however, was not a monopolist, and he disliked monopolistic trust. By 1900, he was producing 1/4 of the nation's Bessemer steel, which is again the vertical integration. So for Rockefeller, who did the horizontal integration, he was kerosene, and so the kerosene oil industry went down due to the electric light bulb invention in 1879, but the automobile industry gave life to the oil industry through the internal combustion engine, which helped Rockefeller kind of gain his famous status. He created the Standard Oil Company in Ohio in 1870 and attempted to eliminate all the middlemen and knock out his competitors. By 1877, he controlled 95% of the oil refineries in the nation. Rockefeller expanded his company by eliminating his other competitors and making a monopoly. Also in this section is the government. Another section of the government was Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, which forbade business activities the government deemed as anti-competitive. It also required the government to investigate trusts, and the law was ineffective because it contained legal loopholes and made all large trusts suffer, not just. So here we have the gospel of wealth. The wealthy used the survival of the fittest explanation to explain why they were financially successful and why the poor were poor. They also have this thing called the plutocracy, which is when the government is controlled by the wealthy. The Constitution gave Congress sole jurisdiction over interstate commerce, the ICC Act. This enabled monopolists to use their lawyers to thwart controls by state legislatures. Large trusts also sought safety behind the 14th Amendment, arguing that corporations were actually legal people. That's about it for the Gospel of Wealth. Section is about the South and the age of industry. As late as 1900, the South still produced fewer goods than it had before the Civil War. Southern agriculture received a boost in the late 1880s when machine-made cigarettes replaced hand-made cigarettes. This increased tobacco consumption. James Buchanan Duke created the American Tobacco Company, in 1890. The South excelled in manufacturing cotton textiles, however, and cotton mills were eventually created in the South, but they paid workers extremely low wages, which you can see in other chapters, were typically the slave workers just working for the bare minimum. That's about it for the South. They didn't have much economic growth, just kind of the incorporation of more manufacturing. Alright, so this is about the labor unions. The Civil War gave a boost to the labor unions. One of them was the National Labor Union, which organized in 1866, lasted 6 years, and had attracted 600,000 members. The purpose of the union was to organize workers and across different trades and challenge companies for better working conditions. Black workers formed their own Colored Nations Labor Union because of some ordeal with the National Labor Union and a Republican Party in their later years. After the National Labor Union died out in 1877, the Knights of Labor took over. They sought to include all workers while campaigning economic and social reform, including and codes for safety and health. On May 4th, 1886, in Haymarket Square, Chicago, police tried to break up a protest against alleged police brutalities. Somebody threw a dynamite bomb and killed several people. Another problem with the Knights of Labor was that it included both skilled and unskilled workers. So when unskilled workers went on strike, skilled workers they replaced them. Because of this, the American Federation of Labor formed, and that was the inclusion of only skilled workers, and they drained the Knights of Labor of their members. So the American Federation of Labor was founded in 1886 by Samuel Gompers. It was a federation and an association of self-governing unions, each of which kept its own independence. They sought for better wages, hours, and working conditions. The greatest weakness of an organized labor was that it was accepted by a small minority of working people, and Labor Day was created by Congress in 1894. So that concludes chapter 24.